Greetings, Lore Seekers, and welcome back to another episode of the Lost Archives. That's right, more Star Wars Legends lore. So, a couple of weeks back I covered a ability known as the Sith Battle Lord technique. And I touched on briefly about the Force bond that is formed between the Sith Battle Lord and his troops. And then I realised I've not really explained what exactly are Force bonds. So, essentially they are known as three distinct things. A Force bond, a Force chain, or Jedi kinship. Now, in its basic form, what it allows is for a link between two Force-sensitive individuals that allows them to influence each other in various different ways. For example, you can send through communications, such through as feelings, images, and thoughts, and usually across a lot of distances. And it will also allow for greater coordination in combat, meaning that you can basically fight in sync. If you ever played an online RPG or multiplayer game, and you know that bit where your team are just so in sync that you've just decimated the enemy in front of you. It's basically that sort of feeling, but it is throughout the entire duration of that combat, not just for that fleeting moment where you become champion. But it's not just this, it is also using this ability will allow one's will to flow between the members in the link, bolstering the strengths of each other, and possibly even drawing on the strengths of each other. This, to one degree, also allows for Force abilities that are active on one person to be shared with the other. For example, if you were to play KOTOR 2, Meet Surik and the Jedi Kreia, if Kreia was to use the Force ability for Shield, it would also be applied on Mitra even. So, that's a bit of a description of what a Force bond is, and the benefits you can get to it. But how exactly are such connections formed? Well, in the natural sense, it is usually between a master and a student over time. Their familiarity with each other would allow them to create a Force bond. But there are other methods in which a Force bond can be created, such as going through significant trauma together, or one such person saving the life of another person. An example of this would be with Bastila Shan saving the life of Darth Revan, using the Force to preserve his life, and inadvertently creating a Force bond between the two. Or another example being Aayla Secura and Quilon Vos, where they had created a bond between themselves instantaneously during their first meeting, with that being that both of them had a predisposition for creating Force bonds, similar to Meetra Surik's ability for creating multiple Force bonds with many people. Other benefits to a Force bond as well is that it can increase your capacity for passing knowledge between those who are bonded. Similar to how communication would work, a master who has got a strong Force bond with their apprentice would be able to teach them much more quickly and pass on much more knowledge of the Force. For example, this could be from lightsaber techniques to certain Force powers. One example of this would be with Bastila Shan using her own Force bond with Revan to draw out certain things from Revan and information that he'd learned in order to aid the Jedi in their search for the Starforge. Another example would be Kreia and Meetra Surik's Force bond, allowing her to teach her techniques that Meetra did not know when she was a Jedi. The greater the bond, the more knowledge that can be passed between each other. Moving on from this, so some of you have probably noticed this sounds very much similar to, as I've said in my previous video and earlier in this one, the techniques used for the Sith Battle Lord, and even to some degree battle meditation. Battle meditation is very similar to a Force bond, but it is different in certain ways in that it allows you to form multiple connections, even to those who do not have any strong enough connection to the Force to be able to influence it. Because, as you know, everything in the Star Wars galaxy generates the Force, But not everybody has the ability to be able to manipulate the Force. This is why you get a difference between Force sensitives and Force insensitives, as they're known. The sensitives can affect the Force, whereas the insensitives can't. But, despite the fact that they cannot affect the Force, they can still be affected by it. That is sort of the principle for battle meditation. You can use the Force to inspire your allies and demotivate your enemies, but I'll probably go into its own video on battle meditation later. So, we've talked about how bonds form, a little bit as to their benefit, but what about the breaking of a bond? In some cases, this can lead to the death of the individuals who are associated with each other. For example, if one was to die, it would be translated through the bond and would kill the other, such as the case with Mitrasirik and Kreia, because of the intensity of their bond. Or in some cases, the death of one person would break the bond completely, but not in full. The bond would still exist, but it would be empty, hollow. Essentially, it would become a wound in the Force. Now, wounds in the Force have their own problems, and that will get its own separate video as well, but it is the Force bond that is partially responsible for the creation of such wounds and the subsequent disastrous effects they can have. Looking at you, Nihilus. Other things that can also affect Force bonds and cause them to eventually break is separation from the individuals. As once a master and student have parted ways, eventually the bond between them, while still having some semblance between the two when they once again meet up, will eventually fade into small obscurity. One such example of this is between the Jedi Knights Jaina Solo and Zek, who, after participating in the Killian hive mind during the Swarm War, were left with a rather strong Force bond, but over time this bond did start to erode and diminish. Though this also did have the fact that Zek did temporarily fall to the dark side, or near to fall, as he embraced the power of it temporarily to overpower a Sith construct known as Ship, and this did significantly weaken their bond, to the point where they'd really not notice it, but due to various other things as well going on at the time, this does have some effect on it. So, in short, we have covered what exactly a Force bond is, how they naturally form, and what benefits and even how to break them. So, in summary, you can have various other unnatural ways of creating Force bonds, such as the Sith Battle Lord technique, Battle Meditation, which is another rare Force ability, Force melds, which I will go into in a separate video, and the negative effects of Force bonds, which include wounds in the Force. Some of these are created through natural means, others can be created via unnatural means. In fact, some of them are deliberately created for their strategic benefits. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments down below, as after all, this is just the thoughts and speculations on the lore of a lizard man. Maybe we can get a debate going down in the comments. Maybe we can get a talk going. And if you haven't already, perhaps consider hitting that subscribe button and checking out my other content. That being said, take care, thanks for watching, and always remember, the multiverse is full of darkness and the unknown.
And a little more knowledge may light our way.